The early morning sun painted the sky in soft hues of gold and pink, casting a warm glow over the grand mansion that housed the Obianuju family. From the outside, the house stood tall, proud, and magnificent, but within its walls, darkness lurked in the form of a woman whose heart was poisoned by jealousy. 15-year-old Amara sat by the window of her small bedroom, staring at the flowers her late mother had once planted in the garden below. Her mother, Nneka, had been the love of her father's life until death snatched her away 5 years ago. Though her absence left a void in the household, her father, Chief Obianuju, had remarried quickly, choosing the beautiful yet cunning Patricia as his new wife. At first, Patricia had put on an act of kindness, doting on Amara like a loving stepmother. But as the years passed, Amara began to notice the change. The kind words turned into cold glances, the warm embraces became rough tugs, and soon, Patricia's true colors shone through. She despised Amara. And it was all because of the way people adored her. Amara was naturally beautiful, her mother's exact replica. Her skin, the color of rich mahogany, glowed in the sunlight, and her bright, intelligent eyes held an innocence that drew people to her. Whenever visitors came, they always commented on how much she looked like her mother. They spoke of Nneka's beauty and grace, always comparing Amara to the woman Patricia could never replace. Patricia hated it. She hated the way Chief Obianuju doted on Amara, the way people spoke of her with admiration. Even in her own home, Patricia felt like a shadow next to the memory of the woman she had replaced. It started with small things. A pinch here. A harsh word there. Then it escalated. She restricted Amara's movements, making excuses for why she couldn't go out to play with her friends. She assigned her endless chores, forcing her to scrub floors and wash clothes while she relaxed in the sitting room, sipping juice and flipping through fashion magazines. But despite everything, Amara remained cheerful, and that only enraged Patricia further. On this particular morning, Amara was humming a tune, a melody her mother used to sing, when the sharp voice of her stepmother rang through the walls. "Amara, where is that useless girl?" Amara quickly stood and rushed out, her heart pounding. She found Patricia standing in the living room, her hands on her waist, eyes filled with contempt. "Why have you not washed the dishes?" Patricia snapped. I was about to do it, Ma," Amara stammered. A sharp slap landed across her face, causing her to stumble. "Don't talk back at me, you useless girl." Patricia hissed. "You think because your father loves you, you can disrespect me?" Amara swallowed her tears. She had learned that crying only made things worse. Little did she know, this was only the beginning. Patricia's hatred was about to manifest in a way that would leave scars, both seen and unseen, on Amara's life forever. Days turned into weeks, and Patricia's mistreatment of Amara only worsened. At first, it was manageable, extra chores, missed meals, insults whispered with venom. But soon, it escalated to something darker, something more sinister. Patricia couldn't stand the way people adored Amara, and what made it worse was Chief Obianuju's unwavering affection for his daughter. He never suspected the torment Patricia inflicted when he wasn't home, and Amara, afraid of making things worse, never spoke a word. But Patricia had grown tired of slaps and insults. She wanted to break the girl completely. One evening, as Amara was setting the dining table, Patricia stood by the doorway, watching her with cold eyes. "Amara," she called sweetly. Amara froze. Patricia's sweet tone was often more dangerous than her anger. "Yes, Ma," she answered, cautiously turning around. Patricia took a slow step forward, her red-painted lips curling into a wicked smile. "You think you're special, don't you?" she asked. Amara blinked in confusion. "No, Ma." "Liar." Patricia spat. "Look at you, walking around like a princess in my house. With your big eyes and your smooth skin. Everyone talks about you. They compare me to your mother, as if she was better than me." Amara lowered her gaze. She had learned that looking Patricia in the eyes only angered her further. Patricia suddenly grabbed her chin, forcing her to look up. "I will make sure that no one ever looks at you with admiration again," she whispered, her breath hot against Amara's face. Amara shivered but said nothing. Patricia released her and stepped back. "Fetch me a cup of water from the kitchen," she ordered. Amara nodded and hurried into the kitchen. The kitchen was warm from the evening's cooking, and the scent of jollof rice still lingered in the air. As she filled the cup, she heard Patricia's voice call out again. "Bring me the kettle too." Amara frowned. The kettle. The only kettle in the kitchen was the one on the stove, still hot from boiling water. But she dared not disobey. Carefully, she picked up the steaming kettle with a cloth, balancing the cup in her other hand, and walked back to the dining room. Patricia was waiting, seated at the head of the table like a queen on her throne. Amara placed the cup before her and carefully set the kettle on the table. Patricia smiled. "Now, come closer." Amara hesitated but obeyed, standing just an arm's length from her stepmother. Patricia reached for the kettle. "Do you know what happens when a beautiful girl becomes ugly?" she asked, tilting her head. Amara's heart pounded. Something was wrong. "People stop admiring her," Patricia continued, her eyes dark with something evil. "They stop talking about her. They forget her." Before Amara could react, Patricia grabbed the kettle and, with one swift motion, flung the steaming water at her face. A blood-curdling scream tore from Amara's throat as the boiling water made contact with her skin. The pain was instant and unbearable, searing into her flesh like fire. She stumbled backward, clutching her face as she fell to the floor. Her screams filled the house, but Patricia simply watched, a satisfied smile playing on her lips. "That should teach you," she murmured. The door burst open, and Chief Obianuju rushed in, his eyes widening in horror at the sight of his daughter writhing on the ground. "What happened?" he bellowed, rushing to Amara's side. Patricia gasped, putting on her best act. "Oh my God. It was an accident." She tripped and pulled the kettle down with her. Amara tried to speak, to tell her father the truth, but the pain was too much. The last thing she saw before darkness consumed her was Patricia's satisfied smirk. The hospital room was silent except for the steady beeping of the heart monitor. Amara lay motionless on the bed, her face wrapped in bandages, her once flawless skin now marred by burns. Chief Obianuju sat by her bedside, his hands clasped together, his face a mixture of sorrow and rage. He had barely left her side since the accident. Patricia, on the other hand, had played her role perfectly. She had wept in front of the doctors, claiming it was all a horrible mistake. She had stayed by her husband's side, pretending to be a grieving mother who had made a terrible error. When Chief Obianuju had questioned her, she had sobbed. "I told her to be careful," she wailed. "I only asked for water, but she slipped, and the kettle fell. Oh, my love, I would never hurt our daughter." He had believed her. Or at least, he had wanted to. Now, as he sat there watching his daughter struggle to breathe, doubts crept into his mind. He had seen Amara's fear before she lost consciousness. He had seen Patricia's nervousness when he rushed in. But what if it really was an accident? A soft groan pulled him from his thoughts. "Papa," Amara's voice was hoarse, weak. "My daughter," Chief Obianuju breathed, moving closer. He gently took her hand, his eyes filled with relief. "I am here. How do you feel?" Amara opened her mouth, but the pain was too much. Tears slipped from her swollen eyes. The door creaked open, and Patricia stepped in, holding a tray of food. "Oh, my baby," she cried, rushing to the bed. "Thank God you are awake." Amara flinched, her body trembling. But Patricia had positioned herself so that Chief Obianuju couldn't see the reaction. "My love," Patricia turned to her husband, dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief. "We should let her rest. She must be in pain." Chief Obianuju hesitated. He wanted to stay, to get answers. But his wife was right. Amara needed rest. "All right," he sighed. He turned back to Amara and kissed her forehead. "I will be back soon, my child." As soon as he stepped out, Patricia set the tray down and leaned in close. Her warm breath brushed against Amara's ear. "You listen to me, you ungrateful brat," she whispered, her voice like poison. "If you ever tell your father the truth, I will make sure you regret it. Do you understand me?" Amara whimpered, her body frozen in terror. Patricia straightened, smiling sweetly. "Good girl. Now, eat your food. We wouldn't want you to starve, would we?" She turned and walked out, leaving Amara alone in the cold, sterile room. Tears slipped down Amora's face as she realized the truth. No one was coming to save her. Not even her father. Days passed, but the pain remained. Not just the physical agony of the burns on Amora's face, but the deeper, more suffocating pain, the realization that no one would believe her. Her father, though visibly shaken, had chosen to believe Patricia's lies. Every time Amara tried to gather the strength to tell him the truth, Patricia was there, her sharp eyes watching, her silent threats hanging over her like a dark cloud. Amara's face was healing, but the scars were deep. The doctor had warned that the burns might leave permanent marks. The thought made her stomach twist. Patricia had succeeded. She had stolen Amara's beauty. The once adored girl now avoided mirrors. She barely spoke, barely ate. The nurses pitied her, but they didn't know the full story. Except for one. Miriam, a young nurse with warm brown eyes and a soft voice, had noticed the way Amara flinched when Patricia entered the room. She had seen the terror in the girl's eyes. And it troubled her. One evening, while checking Amora's vitals, she gently touched her hand. "My dear, are you all right?" she asked in a low voice. Amara looked away. Miriam sighed. "I know it wasn't an accident," she whispered. Amora's breath caught. She turned sharply, her swollen eyes locking onto Miriam's. "I see the way you look at her," Miriam continued. "I see your fear. If there's something you want to say, I can help you." Tears welled up in Amora's eyes. The words were on the tip of her tongue, but Patricia's warning rang in her ears. "I will make sure you regret it." She shook her head and looked away. Miriam exhaled, disappointed but understanding. "If you ever need me, just say the word," she said softly, squeezing Amora's hand before leaving the room. That night, as Amara lay awake staring at the ceiling, something changed within her. She was tired of being afraid. She was tired of Patricia controlling her life. For the first time, she thought of fighting back. She didn't know how. She didn't know when. But she would. She had to. Because Patricia had taken enough from her. And she wasn't going to let her win. The days at the hospital blurred into one another, but inside Amara, something had awakened. She was no longer just a helpless girl cowering in Patricia's shadow. She was a wounded lion, biding her time. Patricia still played the doting mother whenever Chief Obianuju was around, stroking Amora's hair, feeding her, whispering fake reassurances. But the moment they were alone, the mask slipped, and the threats returned. "If you ever breathe a word of this, I will make your life a living hell," Patricia would hiss, her nails digging into Amora's arm. "Your father will never believe you." And for a while, Amara believed it. But something shifted when she caught her reflection in the hospital mirror for the first time since the incident. The bandages had been removed, revealing the cruel evidence of Patricia's hatred. The burn stretched from her forehead down to her left cheek, an ugly reminder of the pain she had endured. Amora's stomach twisted at the sight. The girl who once received admiration and praises was now unrecognizable. For the first time, she felt the anger bubbling inside her. Patricia had wanted to destroy her beauty, to make her a shadow of herself. But what if Amara used it against her? What if she didn't hide in shame? What if, instead of letting this scar define her as a victim, she let it turn her into something stronger? That night, when Miriam came to check on her, Amara reached for her hand. "I want to leave," she whispered. Miriam's eyes widened. "What do you mean?" "I can't stay here. I can't go back to that house," Amara said, her voice trembling but determined. "She will hurt me again." Miriam hesitated. She had suspected Patricia's cruelty, but this was the first time Amara had admitted it. "I believe you," Miriam said softly. Amara's grip tightened. "Then help me." Miriam took a deep breath, glancing toward the closed door. "It won't be easy," she whispered. "Your father trusts her. If you disappear, they'll come looking." "I don't care," Amara said. "I'd rather be anywhere else than under the same roof as her." Miriam studied her for a moment, then nodded. "I'll help you," she promised. For the first time in weeks, hope flickered in Amara's heart. She didn't know what was waiting for her outside those hospital walls. But one thing was certain, she was done being a victim. And Patricia was going to regret everything. The night air was thick with humidity, and the distant sound of thunder rumbled in the sky. It was as if the heavens knew something was about to change. Amara sat upright in her hospital bed, her heart pounding against her ribcage. Tonight was the night. Miriam had worked quietly behind the scenes, using her connections to arrange Amara's escape. The plan was simple. She would leave through the back exit, where Miriam's cousin, Checker, would be waiting with his motorcycle. He would take her to a safe house in another town, far from Patricia's reach. But there was one problem. Patricia had insisted on spending the night at the hospital. She had been acting more anxious lately, as if she sensed Amara slipping through her fingers. As Miriam entered the room, her eyes flicked toward the sleeping figure on the couch. Patricia, lying under blanket, breathing softly. "She's asleep," Miriam whispered. "We have to move now." Amara hesitated, staring at her stepmother. A part of her wanted to wake Patricia, to let her know she had failed, to see the shock and fury in her eyes as Amara walked away. But now wasn't the time for vengeance. She silently slipped out of bed, ignoring the dull ache in her body. Miriam helped her into a hoodie to conceal her bandaged face. "Stay close to me," Miriam instructed. They moved swiftly, the sound of their footsteps muffled by the soft hospital floors. The hallways were quiet, the nurses at the main station too distracted to notice them. Every step felt like an eternity. Finally, they reached the back exit. Checker was already there, leaning against his motorcycle. He was a tall, broad-shouldered man with a quiet, serious expression. "You sure about this?" he asked, his eyes scanning Amara's face. "Yes," she said without hesitation. Miriam turned to her, squeezing her hands. "This is your chance, Amara. Don't waste it." "I won't." Miriam nodded and stepped back as Amara climbed onto the motorcycle. "Hold on tight," Checker muttered before revving the engine. The bike roared to life, cutting through the silence of the night. As they sped away from the hospital, Amara felt something she hadn't in a long time. Freedom. But even as the wind rushed past her, she knew this wasn't the end. Patricia would come looking for her. And when she did, Amara would be ready. The road stretched endlessly before them, the cool night air whipping against Amara's skin. She clung tightly to Checker as his motorcycle cut through the darkness, the distant city lights fading behind them. For the first time in what felt like forever, Amara was free from Patricia's suffocating presence. But freedom came with fear. Where would she go? How would she survive? The ride was long and silent, save for the occasional roar of the engine. Checker was not much of a talker, and Amara was too lost in her thoughts to speak. Finally, after what felt like hours, they pulled into a small compound surrounded by tall trees. The house was modest, nothing like the grand mansion she had once called home, but it felt safe. Checker parked the bike and climbed off. "This is it," he said simply. Amara hesitated. "Who lives here?" "My aunt," he replied. "She runs a small business in town. She won't ask questions. You'll be safe here." Safe. The word felt foreign to her. As they approached the house, the door creaked open, and an elderly woman stepped out. She was small and round, with tired eyes that had clearly seen too much of life. "This is her?" the woman asked, looking Amara up and down. "Yes, Auntie. She needs a place to stay," Checker answered. The woman studied Amara for a moment before nodding. "Come inside." Amara followed her into the house. It smelled of spices and burning firewood, a scent that made her feel oddly comforted. "You will sleep here," the woman said, gesturing to a small room with a thin mattress on the floor. "I will not ask questions, but I expect respect. If you need anything, ask." Amara nodded. "Thank you." The woman left her alone, and for the first time since the accident, Amara allowed herself to breathe. She collapsed onto the mattress, staring at the ceiling. She was free. But freedom didn't erase the past. Patricia had taken everything from her. Her beauty, her happiness, her father's love. And something inside her told her that the past wasn't done with her yet. Somewhere, Patricia was waking up to find her gone. Somewhere, her father was being fed more of Patricia's lies. And soon, the hunt for Amara would begin. She had escaped, but the real battle was only just beginning. The morning sun streamed through the thin curtains of the small room, pulling Amara from a restless sleep. For a moment, she forgot where she was. The scent of burning firewood and the distant chatter of people outside reminded her that she was no longer in her father's mansion. She was free. But freedom came with consequences. She pushed herself up, ignoring the stiffness in her body, and walked to the small mirror in the corner. The sight made her stomach twist. The burns on her face had healed slightly, but the scars remained, angry, dark reminders of Patricia's hatred. She traced a finger along the rough skin, her heart aching. Would she ever feel beautiful again? A soft knock at the door startled her. "Come in," she said, stepping away from the mirror. Checker entered, his face serious. "We have a problem." Amara's stomach clenched. "What is it?" He hesitated. "Patricia is looking for you." The room spun. "What?" Checker sighed, leaning against the doorframe. "Miriam just called me. Your father is furious. Patricia has been telling everyone that you were kidnapped from the hospital. She's acting like the devastated stepmother, claiming she has no idea who took you." Amara's hands balled into fists. Patricia was always one step ahead, twisting the truth to fit her narrative. Checker continued, "Your father has the police searching for you. They think someone took you against your will." Amara swallowed hard. "Do they know I came with you?" "No. Miriam covered for us. But it's only a matter of time before Patricia finds out." A sick feeling settled in Amara's stomach. She had hoped to disappear quietly, but Patricia was making sure she had nowhere to run. Checker watched her carefully. "What do you want to do?" Amara clenched her jaw. "I won't go back." She had suffered too much under Patricia's cruelty. If she returned, it would be the end of her. Checker nodded. "Then we need to be careful. Lay low for a while. My aunt can keep you hidden, but if the police start asking questions, you might have to leave town." Amara felt frustration bubbling inside her. She was tired of running, tired of hiding while Patricia continued to play the innocent stepmother. "No," she said suddenly, surprising even herself. "I won't just hide. I need to find a way to expose Patricia." Checker raised an eyebrow. "That's risky." "I don't care." Amara's voice was firm. "She took everything from me. I won't let her win." Checker studied her for a long moment before nodding. "All right. But if we're going to take her down, we need a plan." Amara exhaled, her heart pounding. For years, Patricia had controlled her life. But now, the tables were about to turn. And this time, Amara wouldn't be the one running.